Welcome into our special Hear Me, See Me podcast show. I'm your host, Melissa Bruner. Hear Me, See Me, as you've been hearing, is a special project of WIBW TV, raising awareness of mental health and various issues surrounding mental health and mental illness. My guest today is someone with experience in that realm who's trying to share lessons learned with others. Damon Parker is here. He is with the Jones Project. He is also the coach of the Washburn Rural High School girls wrestling team. And so first, congratulations, Coach, another state title under your belt.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a fun group to work with this year.
It's very interesting. You were the first women's wrestling coach at Washburn Rural High School. And it's kind of a little bit parallels your journey when it comes to sharing your mental health story in terms of how coaching both the boys and girls team led to a kind of pivotal decision and a very public announcement. What was happening in those years?
Yeah, I had been going through some mental health challenges of my own for an extended period of time. And then I think anybody that deals with their own mental health struggles, they understand that if you don't take care of yourself, then those struggles are exacerbated. And I was not doing a good job of taking care of myself. I was just spending every waking hour and a lot of hours that I shouldn't have been awake on building one program and getting another program to the next level, because at that point we hadn't yet reached the mountaintop for the boys wrestling program. And you know, we did it for a year, and then that second year I knew regardless of the outcome that was going to be it. I couldn't do both anymore. It just couldn't sustain itself long term. And so yeah, thankfully we were able to finish the boys coaching on a high note, and I still miss it all the time, you know. But at the same time, it was what it was. We gave a decade of our life to it, and a decade's a pretty long time, you know.
And you're still giving your life to it through the girls. But you said you'd been struggling with mental health for a long time. What's the backstory there?
Man, I don't know how long your podcast is going to be, but I started struggling with it. First time I noticed was probably when I was in middle school. Or coming out of middle school, coming out of 8th grade. And it was just one of those things where it was not something that was talked about at all back in those days. And so I really had no idea what was going on with me. I just knew that there were sometimes I was down, sometimes I was really down, and sometimes I felt like I couldn't get back up. And like a lot of people that are in that position, I became very, very good at hiding it and not telling anybody about what I was going through and trying to deal with it on my own. And then like any kind of medical condition that you have, if you try to handle it on your own, usually that doesn't work out well in the long term. And so that just kind of kept building and building and building to a point where I knew that we had to do something about it. And quite honestly, my true wake-up call came at Josh Jones's funeral. Josh Jones was a very influential man over at Advisors Excel, and he had an impact on a ton of people in this community and outside of this community. And when I went to his funeral and realized that here's a guy and I had never met Josh. The first time that we were in the same room was at his funeral. And my wife works at Advisors Excel, so I went with her. And that was just kind of my wake-up call, because when I heard, you know, all these beautiful eulogies that were spoken about this man and the things that he had done and the way that he impacted people, I saw a lot of similarities with myself, and I knew if something didn't change, then it was only a matter of time until that was my family sitting in the front row.
Because how did Josh pass away?
Josh died by suicide.
And it was shocking to a lot of people.
It was, yeah.
Because much like you, the outward personality was jovial, happy, motivational even for everybody, especially through your coaching.
Exactly, yeah, and that's what I hear. And to be honest, I almost hesitate to talk too much about who Josh was as a person since I didn't know him. Mm-hmm. But the one thing I can say is he was universally loved. Whenever I talked to people about him, I tried to learn as much about him after the fact as I could, especially when we started up the Jones Project. And, you know, whenever somebody passes away unexpectedly, you hear, oh, she was such a great person, he was such a great person, all that. Whenever I talk to people about Josh, they said, he was such a great person, and here's how he changed my life. You know, and for someone that has that kind of an impact on everybody, to be struggling with something that very few people knew about, I saw some parallels there. And so being at that funeral was the catalyst to me making some changes in my life that I knew needed to be made.
And you were how old, though, at that time?
That was, that was March 5th of 2021. So not that long ago. I was 21 years old.
Well into adulthood, but this was something that you struggled with since you were a teenager. When
Correct.
you think back and you look around when you were a teenager, how isolated did you feel in your own feelings? I mean, did you think anybody else was going through what you were going through?
Honestly, I didn't even clock it because, again, it was something that nobody really talked about back then. So I just thought that I had been conditioned through the sports that I played and the things that I did to think like, oh, this is a you problem. You need to fix this, and like you need to suck it up and deal with it and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that males in general are very, very good at dealing with it on their own until they're not, and I reached a point where I just wasn't good at dealing with it on my own anymore.
Describe that low to me. What was going on that made you realize you weren't dealing with it?
Not sleeping, not taking care of myself. If you just Google warning signs for depression, anxiety, or suicidality, I checked pretty much every one of those boxes.
Did you feel like you were wanting to no longer live?
At times, yeah. And that was a difficult thought to have, and thankfully I've got a beautiful, wonderful wife, Lindsay, and 2 beautiful kids, and they're my inspiration to keep hanging around, but again, being at Josh's funeral, he had those same things also, and he absolutely loved his family to death. And the way it was explained to me was by a guy named Corey, who is a mental health professional. He told me that once you get really, really deep into it, then you start getting into kind of the lizard brain, and it's a fight or flight thing where you feel like the only escape from what you have going on is to complete suicide. And you get to a position where you feel like you're a burden to the people that you love and to the people that love you, and that's what makes those thoughts start to creep in, like maybe it would be better for everybody else if I weren't here.
And I do want to interject right now that if anybody is listening and feels these thoughts, 988 is the hotline. Pick it up and call right now. While we know you have important things to say, your life's more important. You matter. We see you. 988 is the number to call if you're having any of these thoughts that Damon's describing.
Absolutely. And just, I'll interject on that real quick because I made a phone call to 988 yesterday. I had an acquaintance who, this is it's kind of a roundabout story, but an acquaintance who was in Switzerland whose son had a roommate at Northwestern who expressed suicidal ideation. And this guy reached out to me and said, I'm not sure which direction I should tell my son to turn. And I was like, not knowing the kid, not really knowing the situation, let me get back to you. And so I called 988. And within 20 seconds, I was talking to a real human being. They route the call based on the area code that you call from. So let's say hypothetically you've got a cell phone with a New York area code. You can tell them, hey, I'm not in New York, and then they'll reroute you to someone that's in your area, and it is an immediate thing. It is free, and it is there to help. And gosh, yeah, I can't second any more strongly what you just said. If you're having those thoughts and you feel like you're in a position where there's no other option, you got to dial those 3 numbers. You don't wait, you dial 988 immediately.
And this was something that you did as someone who needed advice for somebody
Right.
else. It wasn't even for yourself.
Correct.
So that's another option that I think that's really important for people to know.
Absolutely.
This is something they can do to get help, to know how to interact with somebody who may be having those thoughts as well.
Right, and since 988 is relatively new, I believe it came out in July, not this past July, but the July before that, it's still, there's still some unknowns there. I think people know that it exists, but they're not exactly sure what it consists of. But gosh, it is such a helpful resource. So if there are parents out there that have kids that they're really worried about, those folks can steer you in the right direction by dialing those 3 numbers.
So you then are at Josh Jones' funeral. You have this realization that you need to do something different. He became the inspiration through a friendship that developed with Cody Foster of Advisors Excel for the Jones Project.
Correct.
First of all, before you get to the Jones Project part, what happened for you personally to turn things around, to reverse the thoughts?
Well, first and foremost, I talked to my wife about it. I had spent, gosh, at that point we've been married 15, 16 years, something like that, and had done an exceptional job of keeping it a secret from her. And I've had people, when I go out on the road and I'm speaking to folks, they say, oh, how in the world could you have kept that hidden from your wife, the person that you love, the person that you live now? She would have noticed something's going on. It's like, that's not how it works, man. Like, people that are going through this, we understand other people's social cues. We understand what they want to hear, what they don't want to hear, and we act accordingly so that we can keep our secrets. That's how secrets work, And so it was on that day of the funeral, it was appropriately pouring rain, and we get to the car, and I just basically had what could only be described as a mental breakdown, and talked to my wife about what I've been dealing with, what I've been struggling with, and my only regret, I don't have many regrets throughout my life, but this is one big one, is that I didn't tell her sooner. Because I think, like so many people that deal with this thing, I just kind of felt like you said earlier, like I was isolated, like I was all alone, like there wasn't anybody that I could talk to about this. But the second I told her, I realized I had the most beautiful person in the world that was right next to me the whole time, that was willing to join me in this fight if I just would have asked for help. And so when I go on the road and I'm talking to kids in schools, I always tell them, if you don't get anything else out of this hour that I'm going to talk to you today, just get this one sentence. They can't help you if they don't know you need the help, because you are so much better at hiding those secrets than you think you are. And nobody is going to come to your aid if they don't know that you're struggling. And so you have to have those conversations with those people that you trust, whether it be a trusted adult, a friend that can point you in the right direction, because then those folks can get you from where you are to where you need to be.
It's so true. There's a family that I spoke with. They started Damon's Purpose for their son, Damon, who took his own life. And that's what they said. We couldn't fix what we didn't know was broken. And that's the message that they try to share as well. You can't fix if you don't know it's broken. So just reach out to someone and say something. How long of a development process was it for you to go from that realization to no longer keeping your secrets, to being able to say, you know what, this is so important that I need to share it with other people, and that you became willing to sign on with the Jones Project?
I just saw the personal transformation that was possible for myself after 20, 25 years, however long it was, of trying to do this on my own. It was like, man, if I could just do something that would help speed that process along for people. If I would have had somebody that would have talked to me about this when I was 15, 16 years old, gosh, that would have been so beneficial in my life. And so to me, it was a no-brainer. And I think, I was a teacher for 22 years, and I think most people that leave the teaching industry, they're either of retirement age or, like, it is a stressful job. There's a lot that goes into it that a lot of people don't see behind closed doors. And I was neither one of those. I absolutely loved teaching at Washburn Rural, loved the kids, loved seeing them every day, and I'm not old enough to retire yet. But but at the same time, I knew it was going to take something really special to pull me away from that, something where I felt like I could make an even bigger impact than I could in the classroom, and working with the Jones Project was it.
So what is the Jones Project? What do you do, and what's the message?
Okay, basically what we do is we travel around to secondary schools within the state of Kansas, and I get on stage and I spread a message of hope, and then I also give them basically my own personal story. And I think there's a lot of effectiveness in the fact that I'm a real human being that's standing on their stage in their auditorium, not just some guy that they watch on a YouTube video during their advisory period. I think that personal connection there of just being and sharing in that same space, it makes a huge difference. And a lot of those kids, especially athletes, people that nature, like, I've checked a lot of the boxes of the things that they have on their goal list. And for me to be able to stand up there and say, yes, I was a Division I athlete, and yes, I was captain of this team and that team and all that, and I still dealt with this. I think that really resonates with some of those kids that are, whether it's intentional or unintentionally, they're kind of slipping through the cracks. And we've been able to make a lot of great connections with kids. I was really afraid that by doing this job, I would lose my favorite part of the teaching job, which was those deep personal connections that you make with kids. But quite to the contrary, I think that I've made even deeper connections that are going to last forever with a lot of these kids that I keep contact with. And so I tell people I'm still in education. I just have a much bigger classroom now. And so we travel from school to school. I spend about an hour. You can think of it as a keynote presentation. And I just do my best to A, erase the stigma there, and then B, we're trying to help kids survive, help kids thrive, and help them, like I said earlier, get from where they are now to where they want to be. And I tell folks that, the CDC released a report 2 years ago that 44% of high school students in this country self-reported that during the previous year they persistently felt sad or hopeless. That's half of us, man. Like, that's a big chunk. And I tell those kids when I go into schools that I'm not even really here to talk to the 44%. I'm almost here more to talk to the 56%, the fortunate half that are in the room that are probably never going to have to deal with this, at least not on a direct basis, because hopefully by hearing the story that I tell from stage, they understand that this thing is real and it's not something that people make up. And they have an opportunity to be an ally for someone that thinks that they don't have one. And so, yes, we give action steps for people that are struggling, and we give tips and things that they can do immediately. But at the same time, we try to teach those other folks that, hey, you play a role in this too. And even if you don't have someone within your immediate circle right now while you're 17 years old that is struggling with this, I guarantee you everyone in this room is going to have somebody in their life that they care about at some point that's struggling with this thing. And they're going to want to know how to handle that situation. And they're going to want to be that person that those people want to lean on, not that those people have to hide their feelings from.
Mm-hmm. How do we move via, okay, so there's so much here. But one thing that came to me as you were talking about that is, there are a lot of kids that are struggling, and I think that a lot of people accept that. There's also, though, sometimes this realm that those of us of a certain age have that say, kids these days just need to toughen up. They're right. They're just not tough enough these days. You're an athlete, and you understand the concept of mental toughness. How do you differentiate between the need to develop mental toughness to reach your goals and to pursue the things that you want to pursue, but also mental health and taking care of yourself? Because I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that you can achieve both of those things. It's okay to say that you have some mental weaknesses and mental health that needs to be addressed, but also develop a mental toughness.
Right.
Those can coexist? They
can. And it really depends on what your definition of mental toughness is. To be completely honest, I'm not a huge fan of that term. It's not something that we use within our program.
What's a better term?
It kind of depends on what you're talking about. Resilience is good. That's one that I use from stage quite a lot. I tell folks everybody has a little bit of trauma in their bucket, right? I don't care how good your home life is. We all have a little bit of trauma, and we can handle a little bit, and we need to be able to handle a little bit, because I don't call my physician every time I stub my toe, and I don't call my therapist every time someone looks at me cross-eyed. But at the same time, if you have enough of those traumatic events in your life, then that bucket starts to overflow. Then that leads to negative side effects like depression, anxiety, panic disorder, things of that nature. And so I tell folks, like, yes, you do have to be resilient, but at the same time, it's like, I tell those high school boys, it's like, you want to be a man? You want to be a man? Learn how to ask for help when you need help with something. Don't try to do everything by yourself. When you show vulnerability and when you show authenticity to people, like, that's when people actually will respect you. Not when you pound your chest and think that you know everything there is to know, right? Usually the people that know the least speak the most, and the people that are talking about how tough they are and all that kind of stuff, like, usually there's something underneath the surface there, And I think that when it comes to what people generally refer to as mental toughness in athletics, to me, a better way to describe that is, do you fall to the level of your training in high pressure situations during competition? To me, that's what mental toughness is. It has nothing to do with, I can suck it up and I can get through this on my own, And that would be just an overarching message that I have for any parents that are watching or listening is, respect the truth of your kids, man. Because I have kids that come up to me after I get done in these schools, and they'll say, man, I have tried to get in with a counselor, and my dad just doesn't believe that this is a real thing. He doesn't believe in counseling. And that tends to be more from the rural communities. And what parents need to understand is the world that these kids are growing up in right now is not the same world that we grew up in. And what things that affected us are not the same things that are affecting our kids. And if our kids come to us and say, hey, I'm having this issue, I'd really like to speak with someone about it, God, that took so much courage for them to do that. And if you want your kids to love you and respect you, then you have to love and respect them, and you have to respect their truth. And if their truth is, I need some help with something, then gosh, that needs to be your number one priority before anything else.
Resilience is a learned behavior.
Indeed.
It seems like there's like a second step to overcoming stigma. So there's the one of overcoming the stigma of even asking for help. Where do we complete the second half of that? And by that I mean somebody asks for help, and then it almost becomes this whispered rumor. Oh, they went and saw a therapist.
Right.
That should be okay. That should be an acceptable thing to do.
And we're moving in that direction. Post-pandemic, it's a totally different world than it was pre-pandemic. And a good example would be, I used to teach high school PE, and I had this window that kind of looked into the locker room so you could survive from my coach, or supervise from the coach's office, and there's a door there. And I used to have kids that would come in and kind of crack the door and be like, they'd whisper, "Hey coach, don't forget, I got an appointment on Thursday, I'm not gonna be in class." And it's like, okay, go. And then post-pandemic, kids will kick the locker room door open and be like, "Hey Steve, tell Miss Jenkins I'm not gonna be in math, I gotta go see my therapist." Like, kids are talking about this. They are becoming more and more okay with it. It's the adults that we need to work on. Adults need to be okay with folks talking about it. And I think that people my age automatically assume that social media is a bad thing. And it certainly can be, but it can be used for good or it can be used for evil. And this is something that is being talked about on social media so much now that kids are seeing it every day, and they're understanding that this is a real thing, and this is something that other people deal with, because this person that I follow or this person that I would like to emulate is also talking about it, but they're doing it from their very public platform. Mm-hmm. And so, I really do think that when this generation that's in school now, when they become our age, gosh, man, it's going to be a completely different landscape, because if you've got a whole entire generation that's okay with talking about this, then we're making some real progress, because guess who else will be okay with talking about it? Their kids. And that's how you create social change, is when you get two generations in a row on the same page.
And they're still going to be resilient.
Right.
They're going to still have that resilience that we're developing in them as we talk about it.
For sure.
What are you seeing? I want to talk about your coaching experience.
Okay.
And the young ladies that you have coming in. What do you see develop in them as you work with them? I'm sure there must be some transformational experiences that happen through sports.
It's what we tell our kids is we have no designs of ever winning a state championship. That's not ever one of our spoken goals. We never talk about state championships. What I tell our kids is every year, my goal as coach for this program is to give you 4 things. We want to give you strength. We want to give you a voice. We want to give you a platform from which to use that voice. And we want to give you an experience that's so positive that when you have daughters of your own, you insist that they get involved in it. And I think we've done a pretty good job of doing those 4 things. And the strength in the voice, gosh, these girls come into our program, and then 2, 3, 4 years later, depending on when they joined us, because we get a lot of upperclassmen that join us for the first time. And when they leave, they're completely different human beings than they were when they came to us. And I think a big part of that is that developed resilience that you're talking about, because what other sport is there where you have to go out in front of an entire gym full of people and everybody's watching you and you have no one to save you, and you're going to go do hand-to-hand combat with somebody else that's your size? Like that doesn't exist in any other realm other than wrestling. And it is as someone that has coached every sport that you've heard of, it's the hardest thing a high school kid can do, and physically. And if they can make it through the physical and the mental challenges that come along with wrestling, there's a saying that once you've wrestled, everything in life is easy. And I don't know if that's true, because I haven't seen everything in life, but it has sure made put a lot of other things in my life into perspective. And I think that by giving that to these kids, we are absolutely changing the course of their life. And that's why this thing is so important to us. And it's not just with the girls wrestling team. We felt the same way about the boys wrestling team too. But again, yeah, it's really hard to look at a kid from, when you first meet them and understand where they came from a few years earlier. But a good way to describe it is there's something about wrestling that draws in girls that are missing something in their life. And I first figured this out that first year that when girls wrestling was sanctioned in 2019, I could tell it was about to be sanctioned. And so we started okay, let's get out in front of this thing. And so we start trying to recruit and sell the program to kids. And we had our first ever preseason club meeting. And 113 girls showed up to that meeting. Now, I knew that we wouldn't get all of those girls out, but if we got even half of those girls, it would be the largest girls wrestling team on the planet. And so I collect all of these girls' information, just have them put their names on a sheet so that I could do attendance for club, but B, so I could reach out to them later, tell them about summer workouts and all that. And I get into our school's info system. I start writing down email addresses. I started noticing a trend. And out of those 113 girls that showed up to that meeting, 97 of them came from single parent households. And so that was way too far off of the national average for it to be a coincidence. I knew that there had to be something there. And we've seen that through the past 5 years. As a lot of the girls that come to us have some chaotic issues in their life, and they're looking to find some kind of structure. At least that's my hypothesis on it.
And they find what? They find strength, they find courage, they find confidence.
Strength, a voice, a community, they find everything. They find their people. And I think that's probably the most important thing. And I tell folks that your people are not the kids in your fourth hour. Now, you might have some of your people in your fourth hour, but your people are the people that you get together with outside of the school day, and you work together towards a common goal. Because I think that there's a whole lot of value in getting a group of people working towards one thing, whether it's a tangible thing or not. And that's what they find. And when you have your people, man, those are the relationships that are going to stick around for years. And if you walked into our program or into one of our practices, you would not see kids that would normally sit at the same lunchroom table. We've got band kids, dance kids, debate kids, cheerleaders, kids from the Gay Straight Alliance Club, kids from Future Farmers of America, and all of these kids from these diverse swaths of the social community at Washburn Rural. To watch them all come together and form these bonds and these relationships and create this one big family, it is truly something special.
I've heard that from some students who participate in theater have come in, and they say that this is the community they've found. And so you're right, it's not, whether it's wrestling, whether it's through the theater, whether it's through, some people find it in basketball, baseball, some people just find it in a book club.
Right.
Finding your people and finding that support is so important. What's your main message you want to leave people with?
First of all, like I said earlier, they can't help you if they don't know you need the help. Okay, so if you are struggling with your mental health, if you find yourself in a dark place, gosh, you got to talk to people. Yeah, you got to talk to the people that are closest to you, and then you got to get some advice from people that have been through it before. And you don't even necessarily need to talk to them, but just educate yourself. There is a wealth of free information out there. There are podcasts like this one. There are TV shows. There are movies. There's so many things that you can do to learn about this and learn about the steps that you should take. And I think the more that we hear about other people's experiences and the things that help them and the things that move them closer to the finish line in a good way, I think that's great for people, and they just have to take advantage of it. But the second thing I would say is, again, it just kind of comes back to what we talked about earlier with parents. Is that parents, you have to respect your kids' truth, and you have to understand that it took them so much courage to bring this thing to you, and it will be absolutely crushing for them if you don't believe them. So if somebody comes to you with this, whether you're a parent or a friend or whatever, and you tell them they need to suck it up and be tough, you're doing it wrong. That's not how it works. And parents in that kind of situation probably need to do a little bit of self-education as well.
All good information. Damon Parker,
Indeed. Appreciate
you sharing your story and the expertise and insight from someone who's been there and who continues to work every day. It's not an overnight magic solution. You don't say, I need help, and then the next day everything's
right.
Rainbows and roses again.
What I tell people, it's like, imagine the lunacy of if you went to the weight room twice, and you lifted weights twice, And then you looked in the mirror and you're like, wait a minute, I'm not buff yet. I guess weights don't work. Or if you ate 2 salads, and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't lose 30 pounds.
doesn't
I
work
ate
that
2
way.
salads. Yeah.
Right?
So it's like you got to put in the work, man. And you got to show up every day on the days that you want to and the days that you don't. And you got to lean on those people next to you that you've already established those relationships. You got to lean on your people on those days that you don't feel like putting in that work. And that doesn't mean you go see a therapist every day, but when you go see a therapist and they give you action steps that you should be taking every day in your life, and that therapist tells you that, hey, you should probably get in 10 minutes of meditation and 10 minutes of sunlight every day. On those days when you don't feel it, you got to have somebody there that'll kick you in the tail and get you out the door and make you do what you need to do. Like it is a consistent, you have to put in the work thing. And I tell folks all the time that it's not, depression, mental health disorders, things like that, toughest opponent in the world. They're undefeated. I don't think you can ever completely beat depression. Right? But you can knock it to the mat for an 8 count. And then you get enough strategies down to where when you feel it getting back up again, you can knock it back down again. So it's kind of a never-ending game of whack-a-mole, but sometimes it stays down a heck of a lot longer than others. And the more you put in that work, the longer it'll stay down.
Great rewards. Damon,
Indeed.
appreciate you. And everyone else out there, remember, if you need resources, if you're in immediate danger, call 911. If you need some help for yourself or someone you love, call the 988 hotline. And anytime you can find a whole variety of resources on WIBW.com/hearmeseeme. Damon, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Appreciate
thanks
you
to
having me.
everyone for listening.